Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. Andy, we get to talk about your boys today, your Minnesota
My
Vikings,
Packers?
the team that you bleed purple through and through, and a team that I am really not sure what I'm going to land on here about how to bet these guys, because this Vikings team is a little bit of an open book, I gotta say, and a lot of that is because they went through a major regime change last year, and I think as we reflect on the 2021 season up in Minnesota, it was pretty close to not being a regime change. There was, the ball bounces a little differently early in the season. I think people are probably talking about the Vikings as a dark horse for the Super Bowl. Instead, it's the end of the Zimmer administration.
We just had this same conversation around several golfers, like Will Zalatoris. What if he wins those? What if he wins those playoffs? Or Patrick Cantlay early in the season had like 4 straight top fives. What if 2 of those are wins? Like,
Yeah,
you just look
like
at
Scotty Scheffler. Yeah,
you look at somebody so much differently. If a few little things happen, it's just and granted, I shouldn't say binary because you can tie, but for the most part, the NFL is more binary, where a loss by 1 at the last second counts the same as a loss by 75 points where you were never in the game. So it is such a binary thing looking at that win-loss record. And yes, the Minnesota Vikings were in like 14 one-score games. They had a bunch of games that came right down to the wire, and you know what? They didn't lose them all. They won some of them. We talked about that Lions game where they were probably fortunate to sneak out of there with the win, but they really didn't get blown out much. They didn't blow people out much, and there was a lot of close games. And yeah, 2 or 3 of those games end up the other way. They're in the playoffs. Maybe they win a game, and then people like, when a team gets to the playoffs and they win a game, or maybe they just compete with a top seed, people build that narrative. They say, hey, guess what? This is something we can build off of next year. And you're probably 100% correct, Drew. Mike Zimmer is still in the building if this was a playoff team last year, but it wasn't. It ended up 8-9, and I guess I was surprised Spielman got the axe, but the second
that was a surprise.
Yeah, the second division team in this division that went full ass on it. New head coach, new front manager, front office GM. So Quessy out of Cleveland, which is probably a good trade. This is the thing too, and we'll get into all this, but there's a lot of unknowns around this team because it's the same thing we said with Eberflus and Getsy. It was like, well, we can surmise what we think they'll be, but we've never really seen this guy call plays, either of them. We don't know what this guy looks like outside of, did Eberflus make Darius Leonard, or did Darius Leonard fall to them in the draft, just turned out to be in the right spot at the right time and made Eberflus look like a really good head coach. So there's a lot of what ifs that we're going to sort out. That's a problem we struggle with every year. And the Vikings, I believe, are even more what ify than the Bears because, what was your quote about the Bears? It's like maybe the worst offensive roster in the league.
For my money.
Yeah, no, if not bottom 3 at best case. The Vikings have a good offensive roster. We saw that in plain daylight last year. Justin Jefferson had 1,600 yards. Dalvin Cook missed 3 or 4 games, still had like 1,200 yards. They actually have a couple pieces that are starting to come together in the line, and he's a bit of a punchline, but Kirk Cousins is a serviceable top half of the league, above average, borderline top 10 quarterback. So there's a lot of pieces. And again, hearkening back to something you said about the Bears the other day, Nagy left the cupboard bare. And Bear is funny. Pace. Well, Nagy and Pace. It was a team. But and they're in a different spot. The Vikings are in a much different spot where the cupboard isn't bare, but where do you want to go with this? Like, how quick do you want to try to turn this around? It'll be really interesting to see what the front office does, over the course of the next year with the draft capital and the free agency because, and we'll get to that. The defense isn't going to be around forever, and Justin Jefferson's nearing the. I think this is his third year or fourth. Now he's getting towards the end of a rookie contract, and you got to make some decisions at quarterback. So it is a very strange regime change in my mind. A lot of regime changes are like the Bears, where it's like, oh man, we're in a fucking crater here.
Yeah.
So coming in with a little more to work with, but still a lot of uncertainty.
Okay. I agree with all your statements so far. I think you look at the last 2 years of the Zimmer era, and you see why he was fired. The NFC was weak. You should have made the playoffs with the roster you had both of those years, and you did not. Last year was especially insane because you're right. They didn't like their Pythag was only half a win off of what they ended up with at 8-9.
Yeah.
Problem is you only needed 9 wins to get in the playoffs, and you couldn't do it in a week conference. But you finish half the game under expectation. But really it was sort of, the season unwound on them, as the kind of the floor fell out from under them after a very hard fought win against both the Chargers and the Packers. But it's the early part of the schedule where it's like, oh my God, what might have been. The loss to they had 2 road games to start the season, Bengals, Cardinals. Both of them they lose on end of game field goals. The Bengals one was especially salt in the wound because it was preceded by a Dalvin Cook fumble that wasn't really a fumble, but they reviewed it and didn't have enough evidence to overturn it. So the Bengals get the ball in overtime, kick a field goal, win. Cardinals, similarly, I thought the Vikings outplayed them that day, but the Cardinals eke out a win 34-33. Was that, and that might have even been when the Vikings missed. Did they miss one to end that game? I don't exactly remember, but they feel like both of those, the ball was in, like in tennis, we say the match was on that person's racket, meaning like win or lose, it was kind of depending on how person A played. I felt like the win or lose was kind of on the way the Vikings played in a lot of the early games here, including the Browns loss by 7. Like they had the ball late in that game with an opportunity to tie and they couldn't pull it off. And they got lucky to beat the Lions in week 5, but if those 3 early losses are wins, you're talking about a 6-0 team potentially, and people are buzzing about them being a true Super Bowl contender. And the difference between what actually happened and the closeness of those results really kind of spoke to sort of the end of the era. And nothing else about those results I didn't beyond the Cowboys loss. Again, another one that one was just crazy. You catch an absolute all-time break and you can't even capitalize on it. That was basically the end of the Zimmer regime in my mind.
It's probably fair.
And he was basically a lame duck from that point forward. And I, moving on from Spielman is fine. I think the Vikings as a franchise, like they have an owner who at least kind of gets it in terms of willing to spend the money on the X factors that you can, that can help you, become a premier franchise in the NFL. And I think the Vikings are capable of doing that. And I got a hot take for you, Andy. I think they had their chance this offseason to put a rebuild on steroids, and they chose not to do it. And I think they're going to look back on this as an opportunity lost, because this Vikings team is best case scenario in purgatory in 2022. Worst case scenario, they miss the playoffs again with an underachieving season, and they won't have the draft capital next year to make a move for one of the future franchise quarterbacks. So they're just kind of stuck with Kirk Cousins. And that's the decision that I want to revisit a little bit, because Kirk Cousins had trade value this offseason, considering specifically how weak the quarterback class was. Kirk Cousins was an asset this offseason. The only other guys were guys who had been completely passed over for dead, like the Baker Mayfields, guys coming off major injuries like Jimmy Garoppolo, guys with enormous red flags around them and an enormous price tag in Deshaun Watson. And if the Vikings had elected to start the rebuild in earnest in year one of the Kwesi regime, then I think they get there faster than they would otherwise. And you got to bear with me a little bit here, but you only really have one true blue chip in Justin Jefferson. But you could pay that guy. And you can bring in, you could have moved on from Kirk Cousins. You pay Justin Jefferson, and then you put yourself in position to draft a quarterback in next year's quarterback rich draft. And I think your rebuild happens more quickly. And what are your thoughts on that?
And again, it harkens back to like what is Poles gonna do? What would what's Eberflus gonna do? Like, would they ever consider just tossing this season out? And then, we talked about that. If you missed the Bears podcast, we said this, like, who gets a job the next time around? The guy who won right away and proved like, hey, I can take a bad team and win more games than I thought, or the guy who did the right thing, probably, and set the team up for, success by tanking that first year and getting things in the, in the right direction, moving in the right direction. And it's for sure the guy who wins. So it's hard to, kind of sort out everybody's, what would be the best for them? What's their best case scenario for their career? And it's not always what's best for the team, which sucks. I do like what you said. The Wilfs are, they're businessmen first and foremost, but I think they understand enough about, hey, guess what? If the team wins, like, it is good for business. It's not just straight. It's crazy that Cincinnati had so much success, and yes, I mean, it just lightning in a bottle getting that offense put together and some nice drafting. But Cincinnati was always one of those teams where if they had success, it was not because they were trying. They were just trying to run that as a profitable business. But the Wilfs are willing to spend, so it is a little interesting to see the direction they went. And I do think you're right. I think it's going to be a longer rebuild because it is a weird spot. Like, you don't have as much leverage moving Kirk now. You have Dalvin Cook getting a little older, Thielen getting a little older. We're talking about this defense is starting to lose a lot of its key pieces, and if certain things don't work out, it's not going to be a terribly good defense because you can't just have like one good guy at each level and expect it to be a top half defense. Other pieces have to move in. So then that, I guess, thought exercise. Would you rather be, and again, throw out Virginia here and the Wilfs, like, just consider it, you have a good owner, but would you rather be Poles or Kwesi? Like, would you rather
Kwesi
be
by a mile?
it's
Not close. The Vikings were the best
sure.
GM job going.
No, it is. But I'm saying the situation you're in, like the Bears, like you do get to kind of build your own. Because the roster,
here's
you
the
have
thing.
a blank slate to work with, which is fun.
So
I mean, it is Kwesi.
So the Bears, I think, recognized where they were and did the right thing. We talked about that already. The Vikings, I don't think you can say the same. And I guess what I mean by that is what just happened last year. You had a fluky Super Bowl win by the Rams, but it validated the idea that if you have a team that is built to win now, you can go get a quarterback like Matt Stafford, plug him into your system and go win a championship. And like, if you squint real hard, what is the difference between Stafford when he was at the end of his Lions tenure and Kirk Cousins the last couple of years? Right? If you're squinting, are those two, this is the same picture, right? The Office meme is the same picture.
Yeah, it is like, the same picture.
He's kind of got a very distinct ceiling, but a floor that's a lot higher than a lot of the other guys out there. And I feel like you could have capitalized on that, and you could have made some team out there think that they were
the Rams,
Kirk Cousins away.
Yeah.
And that team might have been the Colts. That team might have been the Commanders. Like, you could have gotten some draft capital from a team that is so thirsty for quarterback play and has a good roster otherwise, on the basis of this promise of you're a quarterback away and Kirk Cousins is that guy. It would have been great if they had traded Kirk Cousins back to the Commanders. That would have been just absolutely phenomenal.
I think we mentioned it at the end of the season when it was, rumored that he was on the block. We said like the Colts would be a crazy good fit. Like
Colts
I
would be
think
one of
that
my
would,
great, yeah.
like
And honestly, like,
we said, I think that we made a joke. We said like the Colts, that team is very good. Like that team, it wins their division and then just gets shit stomped by Buffalo in the playoffs. Like
yeah, and
it's not
yeah,
high enough to like take him to the Super Bowl, but you don't know. Like
we'll get to the
something
Colts.
clicks and you get there.
We'll get to the Colts and we'll get to Matt Ryan. But I will go to my grave that Matt Ryan has a scarier floor than Kirk Cousins this year.
Yeah,
For sure. For sure. And so the ceiling may be about the same, but the floor potential for Ryan being washed is non-zero. And so, yeah, I think realistically, like, that was your move. Get more chips in this last year's draft to rebuild your trenches, to to add another wide receiver, for future quarterback, attack quarterback next year. And rather than go that route, they bring back Kirk Cousins, and it's literally like Groundhog Day now. And you're like, what is different? What is different other than the coach about the personnel of people in this locker room?
Yeah.
Why is this year going to be any different?
Let's get into this year because I think, I mean, just the headline is, 2021 was a disappointment for everyone, but people who wanted Zimmer fired, they're happy. We're moving on. And I think our hypotheticals are on. Our hypotheticals are usually on, but unfortunately, they're not what the team did, and we're stuck to talk about what they did do. So, what say you about the regime change? I know you see a lot of stats on Zimmer running on early downs way too often, running on just passing downs way too often, not using motion in the correct ways, and we just saw. I mean, it was just an absolute. What's the class you can take that's taught by like celebrities? Master class? Is that
Sure.
what it's called? Yeah, it was just a master class in like name nepotism. Like Zimmer had a kid on the staff. Clint Kubiak was your offensive. Like it's just a bunch of people that like. Do we know if these people are qualified or does their dad coach? Like, oh my dad's mayor. But it was dumb. Like the coaching staff they put together was. It felt like every year it just got worse from a standpoint of like this is what we're gonna roll out. This is what we think is gonna work at this point. So good to get rid of a defensive head coach. I said defensive head coaches only work if you have a very smart, innovative, willing to try things offensive coordinator, which the Vikings really kind of didn't have. I mean, at one point they did, but then he ended up in Cleveland. So
right.
we end up with bad leadership at the helm as far as what this off. And like we talk about, Justin Jefferson is a number one receiver with a bullet. Dalvin Cook can do all sorts of things. Cousins is above average. Thielen, Osborne, Irv, like you have good skill position players, and the offense was just getting held back. Now the description of Iowa. Now the wisdom would say, hey, this guy he coached for the Rams. He was a quarterback when he played. He's just going to come in and they're going to be winging it, or they're going to play just like the Rams. And I wanted your opinion on that kind of in a broader sense. When you bring in a coordinator as a head coach who did not call plays, you don't often get just like, hey, it's not going to be like McVay. Like, here's what McVay did. That's what the Vikings are getting. I think it's going to be obviously much different than what we saw from Zimmer. God, like the guy should be run out of town week one if we just see the Zimmer game plan again. But like, I don't know if it's just instantly going to turn into, Sean McVay's genius or whatever you want to call it, channeled through Kevin O'Connell. So it's tough to say. The guy did not call plays in LA.
Hey, Zach Taylor made it to the Super Bowl, Andy. I think here's the thing.
That's fair.
Uh,
Like, I don't know what to make of the
the
guy. Do you have
process.
do you
So
have a
the
take?
yeah, I do. I think he has realistic potential to even not do a great job. He should still be able. He is playing with house money because of what Zimmer did over the duration of his tenure and the way that offense played down and the degree to which they handicapped themselves in a lot of games and the
It
degree to
is.
which a lot of those close calls, a lot of those, oh, they needed a very lucky bounce to beat the Lions. Like, ton of that shit was self-inflicted, just like the fucking
It
FIFA.
is. That's a
And
really it's a really good point, though. It is like it's it's
so,
an
yeah,
expectations thing, like how you
right,
win Coach of the Year by having a terrible year the year before.
right. So
He's
literally, O'Connell can,
yeah,
yeah.
he's the stepdad after the dad went to jail.
Yes. Oh my God. What a
Like,
what a metaphor.
yeah, that
Really.
like you look better by comparison no matter what you do. And I mean, what is the chance that like he runs more on first downs than Zimmer? I mean,
Zero.
it is zero. We don't
Zero.
deal in
Yeah.
absolutes, but it's zero. So
It's
he's
zero.
going to
Yeah.
look better by doing things that are more forward thinking.
And so I guess he's playing with house money in that, number one, he comes in and he takes over a situation with talent on the offensive side of the ball, with a quarterback with a relatively high floor, with an analytics, minded GM who's going to ask him to do things a certain way, and that's going to be plus EV in general, and that you're going to clean up some of the low hanging fruit, some of the easy shit that's there to get extra wins in the NFL these days, and he's probably going to capture that stuff. And in doing so, the offense itself, you're going to be able to look at it and objectively say, relative to years past, there was growth. There was positive improvement here. And so he's playing with house money in that regard, even if he is not capable of coming in and constructing, world mind-bendingly good offensive plays. But even that, like, getting to Kevin O'Connell was not an clean path for this front office, which has got me a little spooked about them. Like, the initial hiring of Kwesi was like like, I felt like everyone who's analytically minded and studies football, that was like a high five moment. Like,
Oh yeah,
great work, great job, guys, you got him. And then they flirt with Harbaugh. The fuck was that?
that
Like,
was weird.
why in the you're gonna replace Zimmer with Zimmer Light? Like, really?
Part
Like,
part
that's so
of
bad?
part of
And
me wanted that so bad. Just like the part of me that would stop to watch a house burn down. Like, oh shit, look at
oh,
that. Like,
this will
oh
be
my god,
interesting.
oh my
Like, oh,
god, like
we don't know the lows of this franchise yet.
talk radio would have been amazing for a while,
Oh
especially
yeah.
once I forget
Oh
the
yeah.
Harbaugh thing had a lot of steam. Like there
Yeah.
were people that were very convinced it was done, and that did feel out of character for.
It's
And
like,
I'm
whoa,
glad.
you're gonna take the wheel and you're gonna immediately crash this car? Like, that's not good for any of us. And yet they ended up with Kevin O'Connell, who I think is, you know, like, literally his floor is Zach Taylor, like a guy who has 2 years where you're like, is he good? And then happens to have the right team at the right time, and you decide year three one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of his floor, I feel like. And his ceiling is he could have a lot of the concepts and a lot of the stuff Sean McVay's done to really kind of change the game, that and he could bring that immediately and utilize that with the current roster. And this offense could look a lot like the LA Rams. Like, that's entirely plausible. Like, I started this whole thing off making the joke about squinting and looking at Stafford and Cousins, and they're the same picture. Like, you could cover up their stat lines at the end of this season if both are healthy and play 17 games and not be able to tell which is which, I feel like. And for those reasons, I think it's fair to be bullish about this Vikings offense generally this season. Schedule's weak. Pieces are there. Jefferson's a game breaker. As you mentioned, all the rest of the skill position players bring something novel and interesting and good to the table. You're not counting on any unknown quantities making a leap, really, for this to be a decent offense.
No, the only leap that would really make a difference, and we see like they have a good one, a great 1-2 at receiver. Osborne is fine as a number 3, and we've seen other guys contribute. And you have good tackle play. Like the ends of the line are good. Maybe even a word better than good at some points, but it's hard to
I will only
tell.
go so far as to
It's
say above replacement level.
they're very much above average if you look at just individual grades, and I will give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't know if PFF does anything about this, but if I had my grading system, I would say I should be grading these guys higher because they're playing next to guards that are garbage. So like that makes your job harder. But if you saw, and basically the interior of the line is really rough. Like you're going to be able to get pressure up the middle, and possibly you're just going to get edge pressure too because these tackles are taking on so much of the load. And if you see anybody take a big leap forward, one of these guards, or it's going to make a mountain of difference because that is more than any other positional unit. I think maybe outside of defensive secondary, it's such a unit. Receivers are, yes, they're running different routes to work each other open, but they're more individualistic than a lot of this. But the offensive line is like one flowing, symbiotic relationship between 5 guys, and once in a while you toss a tight end in there for some fun. But it is a problem how bad the middle of this line is, and that's probably going to hold them back a little. But again, if you have we talked about this with the Bears, if you have a smart enough play caller, you scheme around it. You scheme
Okay,
around your
I don't.
weaknesses.
I will take your word for it on the quality of the tackles because I wasn't there with these guys, but that's fine. I will also say though that
A
any
Pro Bowler.
negative, I will say that any negative grading or any like less than you would hope for grading of the offensive line for the Vikings based on the last 2 years,
Yeah.
some of it is predicated on the predictability of the offense. It is, it's tough to do your job as an offensive lineman in the NFL anyway. But you know what makes your job even tougher?
The other team
When the
knows the
team
play.
knows that when the team knows the play. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like like if I was a GM, I feel like there's probably a hidden edge in trying to pick off like high pedigree draft picks who didn't make it in stupid franchises on the offensive line. Because those guys might be better than we think. But they just were asked to do the impossible, which was not only can you do your job, but you have to do your job without any help of misdirection.
Do you
Without
remember?
any
Do you remember Tecmo Super Bowl or those original NES games where if you picked there's 8 plays, and if you, as the defense, you picked the right play, you would just blow them up. But if you
Yeah,
picked
I
like a
remember that.
run, if you picked a run play and they threw, they would usually blow you up. And
Yes.
that's very simplistic. That's an 8-bit video game from 1989. But all the fancy talk you're going to hear in different
Yeah.
previews and podcasts all year, and people are talking about 11 personnel and this position groupings and what they do and tendencies. Like it really all just boils down to being unpredictable. And sometimes that word, the connotation of the word unpredictable, makes it sound like, oh, you're a wild card, or we don't know what this guy's going to do. No, it's the same as fucking NES Tecmo. Like if the team puts out a defense that's meant to stop one thing and you do something completely different, that's how you have success. But again, if it's 3rd and 2 and you're just bound and determined to run one of your base running plays and say we're going to will our way to this first down,
Mhm.
that is predictable. They're going to stack the box, and it's
Yeah.
just not going to work. So like throwing on passing, throwing on running downs, running on passing downs, using misdirection, using confusion, adjustments at the line, being
Yeah.
unpredictable with your
Yeah.
offense is, and like you said, the offensive line has it hard enough, but if you can have the defense reacting where they're not in aggressor mode constantly because they know where the ball's going and they're headed that direction. If they're having to take steps back and reassess and even split second, you talk
Yeah.
about how play action works, and everybody, you can tell them we're not handing the ball off and
Yeah.
promise, and there's still that split second of his hesitation. You see that on the defense, it's going to make the offensive line's job a lot easier. So
Yeah.
that's, if you're a Vikings fan, if you're a Vikings backer, that's really what you're hoping for, is just not being able to tell, when you're sitting next to your uncle watching the old purple,
No, here
tell them like,
comes
oh,
another
I
one.
know what this play is. Like,
Oh, great.
'cause
Yeah, here
that's
comes
how it
another one.
is. You just can tell what the play is every time.
Yeah. So one of the benefits of having a veteran quarterback, I mean, you're handicapped with the salary structure, and that that limits what you can do otherwise with talent on your team. But one of the benefits is you have a guy that presumably at the line can check out of bad plays and check into good plays. He can, the classic Tom Brady, Peyton Manning stuff was always like he's up there telling the offensive lineman in the moment, like roles responsibilities, making adjustments to make everybody look better. And like misdirection and the kind of hitting those sort of secret low hanging E plus EV stuff, like I definitely think that makes players look better. And if your team is not doing it, I refuse to believe that the Vikings never being able to really solve the offensive line, Seahawks never really being able to get the offensive line figured out. Like, I don't think that's 100% a talent evaluation thing. I think a lot of it is what the players are being asked to do and the degree to which the offense is willing to press the easy buttons. And I think they'll be pressing the easy buttons more. I think that's a realistic expectation. And for those reasons, I think that O'Connell will be perceived, rightly or wrongly, will be perceived positively through his first couple of seasons based on the offense itself just looking better and being more unpredictable. Now, whether that translates to wins or not depends a lot more about what's going on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, they lost some pieces, and they, like we said, I kind of alluded to it. You can't just have one good slash great, maybe not great anymore for any of these guys, but you can't just have one real good player at each position level. And to be fair, they are going to have a good pass rush. I think that probably is, still going to be a strength of this defense if healthy. We've seen Daniil Hunter battle numerous injuries over the past couple of years, brought in some help for him, replacing some pieces there. But secondary is still going to be pretty rough. And then lost Barr. Linebacking core is a little lighter, although you did keep a lot of your decent coverage in the linebacking core. So I think really the biggest problem is going to be, hey, this defensive line's going to be good, but will it be healthy? Because it's not very good when it's sitting on the bench in plain clothes. And then the defensive secondary has just been like, hey, Harrison Smith's good, and then we're going to rotate guys through here. And it was tough. 2 years ago, they were down to like fourth stringers, man. There was some real problems, and it's something that really hasn't been fixed. So I don't know what your thoughts on the defense are, but yeah, and like you said, some of the good players are aging out. You have a
Yeah.
window, and this defense is going to start having to replace the Harrison Smiths and people like that.
Yeah, that's part of that's part of what gives me pause. In years past doing this, I would say if you were using any kind of projection on the quality of the defense to make any decisions about how a team will do over the balance of the season, you're wasting your time because it's unpredictable. It's more of a reflection of the offense. And, unless there is a true, obvious, clear Achilles heel with a given defense that could be picked on and can put your team under pressure, then, it's a fluky, difficult to predict exercise. This defense does not look good to me, though. This looks like there are a couple of Achilles heels, which is why I think the ultimate question of retaining Kirk Cousins was a problem, because Kirk Cousins is only a quarterback that can help you achieve success if you are a quarterback away. And the Vikings, to me, are not a quarterback away. There's too many holes, too many problems with this unit, and the aging out of certain players and the attrition to free agency of certain players is going to have an impact, on top of the fact that you are going to be basically starting over with the system. And, I'm sure we were tough on Zimmer for his lack of overall vision leading that team, mostly on the offensive side of the ball, but he was a good developer of talent. He took a lot of draft capital that the Vikings expended on defense and turned especially the front seven players into really, really good players and contributors. And now those guys are either leaving via free agency or they're aging out. And you've replaced them with decent-ish replacements, but guys that I still have huge questions about. I don't really know that I love the Zadarius Smith signing. I don't really know that Dalvin Tomlinson is going to live up to the promise or the expectation that they had when they brought him in a couple years ago. And the health questions swirling around Danielle Hunter, who's your only true elite pass rusher. They give me some pause. Secondary has huge question marks. Patrick Peterson is long way from his best football. Harrison Smith is making way more money than he's valuable as far as a contributing piece. The draft, expending draft capital on effectively a safety DB combo player from Georgia in the first round was a tough decision, in my opinion. Similarly, Andrew Booth is a little bit of a reach, and you're going to probably have to start him. So this is going to put you under immediate pressure this season. And I think the defense is poor enough in terms of talent that the Vikings, even if the offense looks good, they're still going to end up losing some games because of not being able to get any game stops and or just not being able to keep up in some shootouts.
Yeah, they have half of the, close the game theory. They have the running game. Like, the running game should be fine. If they can keep that running scheme, they just need to use it at the right times. They'll be able to run the ball with a lead. But boy, if they don't convert a third down and the other team can go out there with short time, that secondary might get roasted, especially if Hunter and Smith are tired at that point and pass rush isn't getting there quick enough for some quick zips across the middle of the field. These young corners are getting roasted. Patrick Peterson hasn't been graded out well since, Kaepernick was in the league. It's
3 years.
It's been a few years. Like, he's a shell, and so yeah, fully agree on that. I don't know. You want to take a peek at the offense, see what we can do with this team?
Yeah, let's do it.
Or the schedule, excuse me.
Let's look at the schedule. Yeah.
So I have a game plan.
Oh boy, well, save that for that.
Yeah, no, I'm going to save it for the end, but it is predicated a little on the schedule.
Okay, so as I look at this schedule, this does not spook me. This is not one of the tougher schedules in the NFL by any stretch of the imagination. You're favored in a lot of games, which is pretty lucky considering you are a 500-ish team by the market expectation of 8.5 wins. And there's not a ton of elite quarterbacks on this rundown, particularly in the first half of the season, which is when presumably your defense might be especially sketchy, I do think Green Bay is a problem week 1 for you. I do think Philadelphia in general is not a great matchup for you. We've talked about Detroit being a little bit friskier than expectation, and a potential for an 0-3 start is not impossible.
Played them well last year too.
Potential for an 0-4
Detroit played Minnesota tough last year.
Yeah, you got 3 tough games out of the gate where if your defense is letting you down, your offense may not be able to pick up the slack, and you may get off to a sluggish start, at which point week 4 you got to go travel internationally and play the Saints. The Saints have very talented offense, in my opinion. So realistically, wins are going to be tough to come by until you get past that Buffalo game, at which point things start to open up a little bit for you. What's your read?
Yeah, that is my read, and I mean, fuck it, I'm going to spoil it. That's the plan of attack. Like, this team can absolutely trip over their own dicks for 10 weeks and still make the playoffs with that schedule.
That's fair.
I'm not high on Dallas. I'm not high on New England. The Jets and the Giants, I'm not sure anyone is really high on. Indy, again, I don't love the Matt Ryan move as much as some people do. Detroit's still a tough out. They play them tough, but as a team that you should be able to beat. Chicago is a team you definitely should be able to beat. Like, after Buffalo, you could absolutely go 7-1 in that stretch.
Yeah.
And really, what does it take to make the playoffs in 10?
Yeah, that's end of that schedule is fucking soft, man.
If you get to
God
the
damn it.
Buffalo
After that
game,
Buffalo game, you're in
yeah,
really good shape.
yeah. If you have 3 or 4 wins at the Buffalo game, you're not dead.
And yeah, you start taking on some teams that have defensive questions. You start taking on some teams where Justin Jefferson has a real nice matchup. Yeah, I'm with you on that. You got to get, I guess, the key games that are going to swing the season for them, in my opinion, are week 8 and 9. That Arizona Washington back to back with those two basically pick'ems right now. If you win those coin flips, you're definitely going to the playoffs. If you lose those coin flips, then
It's a little sketchier. And it depends
you're
what other
having a
teams are
tough
doing
time.
too. We're presupposing that the NFC is weak. There's a chance that 3 or 4 teams surprise, and it maybe takes 11 wins. But man, with the 7th seed, it does feel like 10 does get you there. So
10
again,
definitely gets you
if
there.
you at Buffalo, after Buffalo, if you're 4-5, like you can absolutely still make the playoffs almost quite easily. Like 6-2
Yeah.
gets you there, I think.
I grade the Cardinals as a better team than you, but you have rest and travel advantage over them there. You could steal that one. I grade you as a better team than Washington, but you got a little bit of a disadvantage having to go outside.
It's still a tough
having to
place
travel.
to play early November in Ralshan. So
I'll tell you why else it's good to probably just give this a good old let it breathe, let them figure it out.
we're gonna decant it. We're gonna pour it and let it breathe.
That week 4 trip to London, not easy. And you're not taking a bye after. You go right into Chicago the next week and then Miami the following week before you get a bye. And so early potential headwind against the Packers and the Eagles and maybe the Lions. Challenging Saints game, potential for tripping over your dick against the Bears and the Dolphins. So this could set up well for a midseason entry on playoffs. Yes, I love that.
That is what I'm putting in the game plan notes.
The notes.
I've got notes for every team. I'll start a thread tomorrow with the first 4. Like we've kind of set out our game plan. It'll be fun to revisit some of these tweets when the Vikes are like 0-11. And like, well, the best made plans of mice and men are sometimes ruined by a terrible defensive secondary. So, I mean, we'll look at the odds, even though we did say let it breathe, because I think it's at least worth taking a gander at this season win total, seeing what you think. I would not bet the juicy over, even a flat 9 at a good price. But I mean, the under. If I'm betting the under, I'm probably taking at least one step down into the alts.
Oh yes.
Like if this team really struggles and loses a bunch of coin flip games, like this is a 5 or 6 win team. That's a thing that will happen when you have new coaching, a new staff. Do you know who the head or the offensive coordinator is? I'll give you a clue. Man. His father has me blocked on Twitter, and his grandfather is a bum.
Wade Phillips' son is a coach?
Wes Phillips.
Oh wow.
Third gen. It's funny I made fun of the nepotism.
Yeah, it still exists. It's alive and well up in Minnesota.
So I don't know anything about him, but he obviously it's still. I think Kevin O'Connell is still pulling the he's going to call the plays. So again, we don't know much about that, but if that's a disaster and the defense doesn't play, this team wins 5 or 6 games. So under 7.5 plus 220. I don't know what you get. Plus, what do they do for a jump on that? Usually 40.
Yeah, usually you get about 50-60 cents. Yeah.
So maybe a 2-1 for under 7.5 would be a look.
You know why else you want that alt under?
Playing your playoff later is fine.
Yeah. Plus Kirk Cousins is getting old. If he suffers from some injury,
Kellen Mond ain't winning you 9 games.
Kellen Mond isn't needing the backup, is he? Sean Mannion
I think it's
I'm saying.
Mannion. I think Mond will move up the whatever you
Okay.
want to call it, the
Well,
depth
if
chart.
something happens to Kirk Cousins early in the season, if he suffers any type of issue going up against some pretty physical defenses with some pretty big bodies in Green Bay, Philly, Detroit, and New Orleans, you pack it in for 2022 at that point,
Yep.
and you actually get the tank that you probably should have done anyway.
And maybe I will go straight up, like straight down to the 6.5. So an alt under.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and
go
and
real
if
under.
they get to that Buffalo game and maybe they've lost some coin flips, my alt under is looking good. I can take
Oh
some.
yeah, just take
I
the
can
points on
take
a
some
bunch of
make the
spots.
playoffs
Yeah.
at like 5-1, and and find a nice Polish middle.
Oh yeah, I love it. I love it where they missed the
I
playoffs,
would
but
probably look
they
for.
get to 7 wins.
I would probably look for some ways to play like game by game sort of stuff. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, if they're 2-9, 7-1 really fucks you down the home stretch. Yeah.
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 That's where you'd have to play some of those games where you think there's an actual
Or
advantage.
whatever however the math works out. All right. Well,
so I mean, your plan. Did you have any other plan of attack in game by game? Somebody in the chat mentioned maybe early season overs. I kind of do have that Lions Vikings game circled as, hey, the Lions receiving core is good. The Vikings receiving core is good, and both have horrible secondaries. And unless you make that maybe the offenses aren't clicking yet and just doesn't work out. But man, I really think you probably should end up with like a total around 50 in that one, and I'd still probably take that over because these defenses can get their ass roasted.
I think overs in general are going to be a little shy all season just because of the potential for once the offense sort of figures things out, then they're going to look a lot better than last year. I mean, the Vikings totals were always stupid low the last 2 seasons in almost all their games because the talent said it should have been in low 50s, high 40s, and it was like 47 every freaking week. I felt like, and it barely got there a bunch, and it didn't get there a bunch. Like it was there is an upside from a scoring standpoint that takes these games early in the season over. I agree. Okay. Saints is a good example. Detroit's a good example. Green Bay is a bad example just because Green Bay. Like I don't really know how to handicap that game, frankly, week 1. We're talking about Minnesota now. We're going to talk about Green Bay next, but like
teaser,
it's a tough one.
Teasing
season. You're going to get Minnesota at home at 8.5. That's pretty fucking good.
Actually, that's really probably my favorite teaser leg. Honestly,
that's a really good leg. Oh man.
All right, so plan of attack is maybe looking at them after Thanksgiving and seeing, is this a team? And again, it's not just when we make these plans, it's not just, is the team in the right spot for me to maybe attack with the bet? I thought the price still has to be right.
Like, of course.
If the price sucks, we're still probably just going to avoid it. So we're going to have a game plan for all 32 teams, and about 26 of them are going to get thrown out the window because either the price or the situation don't merit it. But yeah, let's
one of them's going to come through.
Let's move on to those Green Bay Packers as we put a bow on the NFC North.
I love it, man. Let's do it. Do you count me down?
Oh shit! I forgot. This is going to be my favorite bit. All right, 3, 2.
Welcome to the deep dive. Andy, you ready to put a bow on the NFC North?
It's nice to get back together and talk Green Bay. So
yeah,
if you're watching this live, it's going to be weird.
You'll never guess the last team that we're going to handicap. It is the perennial champs of the North, the Green Bay Packers. 2-time MVP now. 2-time returning MVP, Aaron Rodgers. We are going to learn true or false. We're going to learn something about Aaron Rodgers this season.
Yeah, we're going to try to figure out that tattoo, I guess. No, 20-21 for the Packers, 13-3. LaFleur, another division title in his cap, another MVP for Rodgers, and then they go out and put up 10 bleeping points in the playoffs and do not win it. I mean, all things considered.
Do you want to start there?
Yeah, if I'm no, that's I don't think there's a lot to talk about in the 2021 season outside of
Okay.
that. Like everything else kind of went to plan, didn't it, Drew? Like Adams
Yes.
was amazing. He caught a lot of touchdowns. Rodgers got him there when he needed to. They coasted to a division title. They fought at the end and they got their bye. They got the 1 seed. They lost a home game by scoring 10 points. And LaFleur seems to be a different coach in the playoffs, which is a problem because this team likely underachieved. This team, the way this team was set up on offense and defense, this team could have beat anyone in the league. Like this team, their ceiling last year was absolutely a Super Bowl title. Just having Rodgers and Adams and the defense playing at even the above average level, I think we saw like that team can beat the Rams. It can beat the Bucks. It should have beat the Niners. Like that team should have been, and it was the number 1 seed. They should have been able to at least have a shot at getting to the Super Bowl. And I don't know if they beat the Bengals or if they're up against the Bills, I'd have still made them a dog. Same thing with the Chiefs, but they're not a big dog, chip chair and a chance. So scoring 10 points and losing to the Niners at home, massive, massive, massive disappointment. If you're a Packers fan, you can't even be excited about the MVP or the 1 seed or any of that. That was a horrible way to end your season. And
So
that window is fucking closing.
6 months have passed, and I am not over that game, even remotely. That was the
It still
softest.
doesn't make
That was
any
the
sense to
that
me.
was the pudding softest performance in a playoff setting that I can remember from a team that played as well in the regular season as the Packers. I actually can't even remember like another playoff performance, home playoff game that was that soft. The conditions were your conditions. It was freezing cold, blowing snow. Your team was hosting a team from the Bay Area, and you got out physicaled in your own house
Do you
by a
remember how
team
much
with a
San Fran
quarterback that
scored?
had I think their offense scored what, 6 points?
That was a bit of a
There was
trick
a
question. You got ahead
Yeah,
of
the
it. You
offense scored
wily
6.
motherfucker. Yeah, no, it was special teams problems. I didn't
There was a
bring
10
I didn't
a
bring that up.
10-point swing, due to special teams. But you know what?
Yep. But yeah,
It should
The Niners.
not have come down to special
No,
teams.
so the
No
Niners
way.
did virtually nothing on offense.
Virtually nothing.
The Niners were gifted some things on special teams, but after all that was said and done, the Packers offense absolutely was a massive letdown, putting up 10 points at home like that.
Massive. Like all-time bad. And it like I'm trying not to read too much into it. I'm trying to kind of be like, hey, everybody sometimes has a stink, they come out and they give you a stinker. Like it happens. Like the playoff pressure was real. Rodgers knew he had his second MVP wrapped up and pressure was real for him to make a run. The rest of the NFC was wide open. They were huge favorites to go to the Super Bowl. But yeah, god damn, that was such a soft performance. And you're right, LaFleur called the game poorly. I thought he called the game extremely poorly, frankly.
Yeah,
And
it was like a perfect storm of that and the special
yeah,
teams screw ups. And
yeah,
then just, I mean, I don't even want to blame the offense as much as I should blame LaFleur for calling some of the offense, but the offense still did let down.
yeah. And honestly,
It was
like
something.
they were making it hard on themselves, period, that whole game. And like I look back at uh the like I don't think I'll ever, as long as LaFleur is a coach, I'm not going to forget this. But he comes out of the halftime and does the sideline interview. I don't think I've ever gleaned a piece of information from a sideline interview ever. And usually we're doing the halftime show, so I'm not even listening to them because it's that useless. But I happened to be stuck in a shit traffic accident trying to get back home to do the halftime show. And I was streaming on my phone, sitting there on the freeway. And LaFleur talking to the halftime reporter was basically like, no, everything's fine. Like, no, we don't need any adjustments. Like, this is going great. And it was like, what game did you watch, man? What half of football were you watching? Like your opening script got you got you a score, and then you did jack squat
That's
against.
the other part of that. Like right off the bat, it looked like the game we thought we were going to get. Like, oh,
Oh,
this
first
the
draft, no
offense
doubt.
is
Boom.
the offense is crisp.
Yeah.
We're going to be just fine. They're probably going to put up 28, and I'll be damn sure the 49ers are not getting to 20. So I
Dude,
just felt like they
Jimmy
do that
G
once
had
a
a
quarter.
broken shoulder and thumb,
Yeah.
and he's out there in 10 degrees, windy, blowing snow, and you couldn't get a win. You couldn't score enough points to beat that offense that day. Like it was such a blip. It happened on a Saturday night, and then the Sunday games were so fucking good. Those
Yeah.
Sunday games were
It got
so good.
lost a little, didn't it?
It completely wiped it off the map. Completely. You think anyone was talking
We're
about
not letting
anything
you off the hook,
besides
LaFleur.
Bills Chiefs completely
Oh my God.
completely masked the playoff failure that was the Green Bay Packers end of their season last year.
Yeah,
That
how good were
was
the playoffs last year?
They were
They were
really
fun.
fucking good. They were really good. But that game was not.
No.
Especially from the Packers. And it was so bad that I was kind of reading into it in the moment like is Aaron Rodgers really done here? Is he done? Like was this like some weird passive aggressive performance from him? Like he just wasn't he was like fine, you're going to call a bad game, I'm just going to let it happen. Like it kind of felt like that to a degree, which is insane to say.
Like
But
a child.
yeah, it felt childish in some of the stuff that was going on because
No, you're not. You're not off base there.
a quarterback with as much experience and as good as Aaron Rodgers is, because don't make no mistake, he is all-time great at passing the football. And he was out there with an offensive unit that had some real, like really, really torch you skill position players. And he didn't make any adjustments. He wasn't making changes at the line of scrimmage and checking into good things. He wasn't adding extra protection because that was one of the bigger things in the game. The Niners just bringing wave after wave of guys, and every single play call was like, "Hey, we're gonna have a play that takes 7 seconds to develop. We're gonna send Valdez Scantling on a deep cross, and you're gonna have to hit him 35 yards down the field in blowing wind." Like they didn't push the easy button once that whole game, and it was mind-bendingly stupid. They get that huge big play at the end of the first half with the home run to Aaron Jones. They didn't score anything, I don't think. Like they missed the field goal ultimately on that drive. I'm going from memory here, but that was as phenomenal a playoff failure as I can remember. It was soft as shit too, and ultimately a lot of the Packers losses the last 2 years were just soft. They were just soft. And it's insane to be anyway analytically minded about the NFL, but have that kind of a take. But that's just the way they were. Like that game against the Colts the previous season where they just went into the dome and just softed up, gave up that soft ass fumble on to ice things for the Colts at the end of that one. Like they just have those characteristic moments where they just look lost and weak and stupid and terrible. And they did it in the playoffs last year, and they did it a couple other times too. And I don't really know how you fix that and make yourself a playoff contender in one off season, considering they didn't really turn over much of the roster, but it was a weird year for the Packers last year. The Aaron Rodgers drama was bizarre. He missed a game because of COVID. He lied about getting vaxxed. All kinds of crazy shit was going on. They had the whole last dance thing. This is gonna be my last year with Devontae Adams. Last time we're going, me and you, like Scotty and Jordan, and then he cashes in with the all-time payday and lets Devontae Adams take a hike because there's not enough money for both of us. Sorry, buddy. I think Aaron Rodgers is not a good leader. I think he's probably not a good teammate. And I think LaFleur does not have the gravitas to go head to head with a player like that in the locker room and tell him how it ought to be. And even if LaFleur did have that gravitas, I'm not sure he has the right vision. I'm not sure he really knows the right way to build a Super Bowl contending team, considering he had input on the draft decisions like Jordan Love and AJ Dillon and continuing to build on the defensive side of the ball here. It's just a weird scene in Green Bay. I don't really know how else to characterize it.
Yeah, let's so into 2022. Not a ton has changed, but we are missing, I don't know, your second best player in one of your most important positional groups. But we did add Sammy Watkins, so there's that. I don't know. Sammy Watkins has been great for like the first 2 weeks of the season in fantasy for 5 years, and then he just disappears or gets hurt. But um, yeah, you said we're going to learn something about Rodgers, and this is probably why I'm staying away from a lot of Green Bay stuff early on. You either have to be confident enough that you know something the market doesn't to bet, or actually know something the market doesn't. And I think if you're going to say there's big edges for Green Bay, you're essentially saying Rodgers is gonna be fine with no matter who splits out wide. And we've seen it's tough with just Adams and other guys. If you just who's that guy? That's been difficult enough. And Adams was, enough, he was great enough to elevate the offense just by himself because he's that fucking good. But when you don't have a clear number one at all, and you bring in Sammy Watkins as a replacement, and you don't draft any receivers high, I again, it's like they're just messing with Rodgers. Oh, you took the money? You were gonna do it again? Like it's the Goofy meme. I'm not gonna do it again. I'm not gonna draft any. There's a bunch of receivers. Like what mock did you see that didn't have the Packers taking like the fourth best receiver? Like they all did.
Ooh. Yeah, I don't think there was one.
Yeah, every box was a little different. Once you get down that far, they do tend to deviate quite a bit, but they almost all had receivers going to Green Bay.
Dotson, great spot for Dotson.
Dotson,
Olave, what a spot for Olave.
Dotson was a heavy one.
Yep. They're gonna reach for Watson there, or Sky was Sky Moore. That was
Sky Moore. Yeah.
Everybody. Okay.
Quay Walker. Yeah, Quay Walker made us money. We got the Quay Walker over under.
Yeah, Quay Walker was a great choice. Absolutely the best pick of the draft.
To be fair, good, Femi, good call on that.
Not the best pick of the draft, but a top 3 pick in the draft, surely.
It was up there with Stingley and Walker for me.
Absolutely. The general, and I hate when we're stuck doing this, where we have to kind of navel gaze about narrative bullshit, but we do. Like, there was clearly something that motivated Rodgers the last 2 seasons that got him to the MVP level that he just did not have the previous years. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, no, I mean, he was.
Do you want to quantify it as? Do you want to quantify it as spite? Was it a spite move? Was he just being spiteful because of the decisions in the draft and free agency process?
Yeah, was there some like bulletin board material where it's like Rodgers' parents say he'll never win the MVP
again? Yeah, right. Like was it out of spite that he was just performing better?
He's a weird season? Like he's a weird dude. Again, like I don't think he'd be a good hang. Like I think he is probably he's. I think maybe you can say good leader, shitty teammate. I think he's still a decent leader at times, but yeah, I wouldn't. I don't know if I'd want to like party with this guy. So, and that's why. And Welkman brings this up. If it was spite, would he still be in Green Bay? That's what didn't jive with this whole thing.
Well, was
the money good enough, or he just said the hell with it?
That's it. That's the next question. So if it wasn't spite, if he stayed in Green Bay, if he doesn't walk away from being a quarterback at all, then it was about the money ultimately. He wanted to pay
MVPs will help your case when you're negotiating.
Of course. So it was basically like, but so we can kind of actually, I think, combine those two, right? Like it was literally like, well, if I'm not going to get the help I need to win a championship and go out a la John Elway, then I'm at least going to win some spite MVPs and get one last massive payday out of this.
Spite VP.
And so he gets 2 spite VPs. He gets the all-time contract compensation.
It was good.
What's motivating him this year?
All right. Starting right now, it's opposite day. Okay. So I'm just gonna say things that I think are funny that I don't know. Other quarterbacks, you could make a case for this actually being a thing, but like proving he can do it with lesser wide receivers, wanting to make these wide receivers better for their own personal gain, doing it for the team and the fans. Like these are not things that I associate with him. Especially again, you nailed it. That's kind of where I was headed to. It's like if he didn't do this and want out of Green Bay, did he just do it to get the big contract? It kind of feels that way. And everything he speaks out of both sides of his mouth in some of these interviews, and we saw he's kind of a
yeah.
shitty dude at times. And again, his ceiling is still to be the best quarterback in the league at any given game.
You know who had a roster and an opportunity to walk away from the Packers and really give them the FU moment, like the way that Tom Brady did with the Bucks or the way Peyton Manning did with the Broncos? It was the Broncos. They hired his offensive coordinator. And they desperately needed a quarterback to plug into that system. He could have
felt
walked
like that was
the
happening.
It felt like that was happening, and ultimately it did not. But so it kind of leaves me wondering what in the world motivates Rodgers to elevate his performance again for a third straight season on a team that doesn't have a premier wideout. Like he's going to have to do even more, really, this year to measure up to what he did last year in terms of statistical performance. True or false? He's going to have to do more himself.
If you got a big raise at work, Drew, and then you just stopped doing everything, you stopped replying to emails,
full on Peter principle.
Just like, eventually you'd get shit canned. They'd be like, Drew, what's happening? Like, we have to talk. Like, are you fully vested? What's going on? And at that point, like, but
it feels personal.
It's with a. I'm not saying like Rodgers is going to tank the season, but if he plays at like 70% of his best, it's not like they're going to be like, oh, we got to start Jordan Love this week.
No,
like he's not going to lose his gig. He can coast this out. So this is where again I'm very much out on deciding what I'm doing with the Packers because I don't know his motivation, and even if he is motivated, I don't know if it works without having good receivers. So this team is, and again, I'm getting to that attack plan too early. This team may be an under team. If this offense does not work out, and they're like, "Oh, but Aaron Rodgers is on that team, and the other team's pretty good on offense."
No.
Like,
hey,
this defense is good.
I will go much more declaratively on this. If the Packers reach their potential that the market has set for them, if they hit that bar this season, it is 100% because the defense was elite and had very little to do with what Aaron Rodgers brought to the table. I feel strongly about that because
you'd get baseline performance out of Rodgers.
Yeah, you set up the he only gives you 70%, and oh by the way, like if this offense is sucking, if things aren't going well, if the defense isn't quite as good as we think it's going to be, and they're losing games, like it's not going to take long for him to have more fun doing the Pat McAfee show interviews than he is going to be suiting up for Sunday. So there'll certainly be some internal strife in terms of where his efforts are really kind of where he's working the hardest. But even if he does give you exactly the level of performance of last year without Devontae Adams on the field for them, like it's just not going to be as good. It's not going to be as elite an offense. And so I really think the Packers are going to need to find ways to win the game like they lost last year against San Francisco. They're going to need to find ways to score 20 in a game where their defense is holding the opposing offense to 6 points. But they couldn't even do it last year when it mattered the most. So why are they going to do it this year without Devontae Adams?
Yeah. Are we out on the Packers?
Kinda.
All right, let's take an absolute hard Zach Morris timeout. Audience can't see us at this point. We're having a production meeting.
Okay.
What, like, taking everything we said about the other 3 teams in this division, and if you haven't listened to those, stop this podcast now and go listen to those. Like, who wins? If the Packers take a step back, let's say they lose one game, they still beat the Bears twice. Let's be honest. But let's say they lose, 3 out of the 4 to the Vikings and Detroit, like that Detroit number we talked about. Some people
Yeah,
were
three
saying
out of four.
14 to
They're
1.
looking at. Yeah, if they're 3 out of 4, they're looking at wild card.
Yeah, so again, the Vikings number,
Thankfully for them, defense travels.
not as big, but if the Vikings new regime works out, very live to win the division. Like this
Very
could
live.
be a fun 3-team race for this division, honestly. Like I
That's
almost
the way I
hope
see it.
Green Bay underperforms. Like they still have Aaron Rodgers and they still have like we're talking about their defense. I'm going to agree with you for the most part on that. Like defenses don't win championships, but an elite defense can make up for a lot of stuff. And it's not like the floor of this offense is the Bears. Like the floor of
That's
this
true.
offense is still above average to middle of the pack offense. So an elite
Speaking
defense
of middle of the pack
can
offense,
cover that up.
What was the can you do the off the top of your head the last year after Rodgers signed a deal? Was it 2017?
I think it was 6 years ago, 5 or 6.
5 or 6 years ago was the last time he signed a deal, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that offense without a lot of weapons in the passing game, maybe like very middle of the pack. Is that crazy? This was like the end of the McCarthy era. Maybe Rodgers got hurt that year, but whatever the case was, like I feel like you could find a lot of analogs in Rodgers' own past with Green Bay offenses that underachieved by a lot, even with an elite quarterback, that kind of make it look like, like that's probably where it lands for them, somewhere in the middle of the NFL.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you. Just on the defense, I mean, we're again doing a lot of presupposing because that's what we do this time of year, and we have to if we want to have any cognizant things to say. But this defense will be good, should be good, or has to be good. All of them.
I say there is like an 80% chance that this is a top 10 defense in the NFL.
Yeah.
And the 20% chance that they are not is because of injury or just something about the way that they're coordinated that we don't understand, tears them apart. This is going to be, I think among all of the personnel groupings and considering all of the schedules that these teams are facing, if you are to pick who is the most likely to land in the top 5, the Packers are the first pick. More than the Bills, more than I don't even know who else is in the conversation, frankly, besides the Bills and the Packers. But I think the Packers are your first choice off the board if you are forced to figure out who is going to be a top 5 defense this year.
Yeah, I can. And again, these are so tough because you end up with a cluster injury in the secondary, and all of a sudden it's like, well, everything else doesn't matter because we can't cover shit, and the pass rush isn't getting home.
They kind of had that last year.
Yeah.
They kind of had that last year, and it didn't matter. Yeah, it didn't matter. They overcame it because they have really good depth.
They did, and that is a big part of when you start looking at edge cases. Is like, how does this not work? And you go to injuries, like a thin, a fragile team, like we really ragged on the Rams for not being deep, and then they added pieces and didn't get hurt, and it just worked out anyway.
Yeah.
So Bob Woods, but it's the depth kind of stepped up, and this defense was fine. So
no more Kevin King to pick on.
God, that was
a lot of elite. You added 2 elite big bodies from Georgia to an already good front 7. They're going to be some really good. You have some really, really good players that are entering their prime. Rashawn Gary entering his prime. Jair Alexander entering his prime. Dude, and then all of the associated pieces around them are like, even if they take a step backwards, they're above replacement level. This is just a really, really, really good defensive roster. Joe Barry, fine coordinator. His scheme, he likes to run a lot of light boxes, but that makes it really, really tough for opposing quarterbacks to get comfortable playing against him. Like, I can pretty much promise you Kirk Cousins week 1's not going to look good. Tom Brady week 3 is not going to look good. And they're going to feast on some bad quarterbacks on this schedule. Let's flip to that, unless you have any other thoughts on the personnel.
No, I don't think. Yeah, there's not a lot to say other than it kind of ties in with what if the offense isn't as good. It doesn't relegate this team to oh shit, this team is bad. It relegates them to a worse place, which is that purgatory of being a wild card team, not getting a good draft pick and not doing anything in the playoffs again. Because the defense is good and it's good enough to keep them afloat. Like, it's a nice life preserver. So, and if the offense does work, this is a team that will be reckoned with in the playoffs.
I won't go that far. I'm not going that far.
Yeah, if LaFleur can change his stripes all of a sudden, which I don't see. So it'll be a team that looks like a team that could be reckoned with in the playoffs until we get to the playoffs.
Okay.
Yeah, so schedule wise,
you know what games really scare you on this schedule? There's 2, and they're at the end. You got to host the mighty Vikings and the mighty Lions. 2 teams are going to come to your house in the winter and out-physical you, out-tough you, because you're too soft.
Yeah, that Rams Miami section is a little tricky.
That's a nice one. That's nice. No, that's
coming off a bye is nice, but then playing a high-end team stinks. And granted, you're still off your bye, but then having to go to Miami after that, which Miami is we were heavy on Minnesota being a team we didn't really understand, but is Miami the biggest unknown that we're gonna deal with this year?
Definitely.
I think, if
the number one,
top 3 for sure. So
number 1. Well, no, there's Miami tied with
Cleveland. Cleveland's
Cleveland too. Cleveland's up there too. Yeah. Those are your big wild cards. Yeah.
And
sure.
Femi brings it up, going to South Beach. What if this team is not feeling good about where they're at? Maybe they're
here's the thing.
Tied for the division lead, and they decide to go out that night.
That's happened before. That happened with the Green Bay Packers team 2 years ago. They went out to LA and just completely mailed it in against the Chargers. You remember that game? That was memorably poor performance for them. So this is the thing. Because they end with the other 2 teams that they're competing for the NFC North, and they're both being played in Lambeau, the market will never give up on this team. Never. Like things are going to have to go so pear-shaped for you to get a good price on the Packers to win the NFC North. I'm telling you, forget about it now. It's not happening. You're not ever going to see it. Is that a fair read looking at this schedule?
Yeah, there is some noise in that market. Like, it's Green Bay, it's home, it's January, 2 dome teams coming.
Yeah.
Like, you're paying a premium where you could probably just take both of those dogs, sell a point, take both dogs, sell enough points to get to plus 110, and you're gonna win 10% of your money back from.
I agree with
or
that.
5% of your 2 stakes, I guess. So, like, you're going 1-1 against the spread, best case there.
Right, I agree with that. But yeah, so I'm just saying, like, I don't think you realistically can expect to get an in-season bet on the Packers to win the North at a good price. I definitely would not recommend betting it now, but we'll get to that in a second. But it's not like the market's just going to hold on for dear life that the Packers are going to ultimately win this division, which I think means you can probably be patient on everybody else. Frankly.
It reminds me of the Dodgers last year. Like,
yes,
I remember when the Giants win the NL West. And I asked because at this point we knew people who had massive tickets. There were news stories from the Purdums and of the world saying I think Rex, he hadn't gone to play up yet. He had some quotes about like how big of tickets they had, liabilities like 300 to 1, 1,000 to 1 to win the division. Circa had some big tickets against him. And when we went to Vegas, it was that first weekend. I'm not sure. I don't think the season was over, And we said, like, are you getting buried by this? We asked the bookmaker. He's like, no, because like, yeah, we took one and it's worth a lot if the San Francisco wins, but like you can just hang the Dodgers at whatever number and like 20 people are just going to bet it every day. Like every day. Like people are just, well, it's the Dodgers and they're the best team and they're going to come back and win the division. So he's like, so you can keep the Dodgers number where you need at where you need it at, and you're just going to take action, and it builds up by volume, and it'll even things out. And at this point, it doesn't matter if San Francisco wins the division because we have so much Dodgers liability at basically what he didn't say it out loud, but shitty-ish numbers. So it's the same kind of thing where, if the Packers are behind, that there's probably going to be value on the Vikings and Lions to win the division because at that point you're still going to be paying this Rodgers Packers premium. Like, if the true actual looking back hindsight is 2020 down the road, probability was like 50%. The Packers are going to be minus 170. You're going to pay this a stupid premium on them, and it's silly, but I mean you're absolutely right.
So, other than the end, where I think things could get interesting, the rest of this schedule is pretty dog shit. This is pretty favorable, except for the travel and the rest. So it's almost like the NFL was like, you have easy opponents, but we're going to sequence them in a way that really tests you. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
You have 3 out of 4 consecutive rest disadvantages with Washington, Buffalo, and Dallas. You have a long stretch where you are tested physically with the travel schedule of a very, very tough set of opponents, starting with a flight to London, October 9th, to play the Giants. You get the soft landing of the Jets at home the following week, but then you have at Wash Buff Deet, which means Wash Buff Deet. The Deet spot is tricky. It's really tricky.
We've talked about this
It's a
3 times
really
in here.
tricky
It's
spot.
a filthy
It's
spot.
a filthy spot. You're coming off of a Sunday Night Football game against the Bills, who are coming off of their bye. And now you have to go at Detroit and play a Sunday 1 p.m. game against the team that it presumably is trying to prove that they belong in the discussion. Just filthy. And then it doesn't get any better because then you get Dallas, Tennessee, and Philly the next 3 weeks. So that middle stretch there,
And
not
that
necessarily
Dallas
quality
game,
opponents, but the way they're that they're sequenced is
disadvantages
that's
left and
rough.
right too.
Yeah, that's a rough run. I think personally, there will be some opportunities to bet on the Packers early in the season. No, not necessarily the points, but maybe just fire on some unders or just fire on their opponent team total unders. Like the Packers, I think week 3 are going to make Tampa Bay's life absolutely miserable. Very excited for that game. Very hopeful that you can catch Packers plus 3.5 there. A lot of people are going to bring up, remember when the Packers went to Tampa early in the season 2 years ago and they got their teeth kicked in? A lot of people are going to bring up the Tom Brady performance in Lambeau, the NFC Championship game 2 years ago. But realistically, this Packers defense, I think, is rostered in a way to make a limited Tampa Bay offense early in the season absolutely miserable. But yeah, a lot of unders looking pretty damn decent on this schedule too. New England, Giants,
I think
Jets,
it's an under team.
under. Washington is an under spot. A lot of under spots on the schedule. Without looking, Andy, without looking. What we already talked about Green Bay, Minnesota week 1 being a beautiful teaser spot. Without looking, what is the total?
Minnesota, Green Bay, 47.
Green Bay at Minnesota, 49.
Really?
Ooh.
A bit higher than I thought.
A little higher than I thought. Yeah, same.
Maybe another reason to like a teaser.
I think so too. Yeah, that's a nice little under spot. I agree. A lot of good ones.
Might tease that total. I'm kidding. I'm not doing that.
Nice over spot, Green Bay versus Chicago for over sacks. That's
Yeah.
probably where the Rashawn Gary Defensive Player of the Year campaign starts.
Yeah.
That game.
Don't think I didn't see that in the chat, guys. So
Yeah.
Rashawn Gary is very good.
He's very good, and he looks to be the beneficiary of Zadarius Smith moving on. He's going to get a lot of those pass rushing opportunities, and he's a very good player and running into his peak. So, yeah, fine being bullish on Gary.
Odds. Here's some stuff I won't bet. If I had to make one,
oh my god, I haven't looked at these recently. 12-1 to win the Super Bowl is an absolute absurd number. Absurd number.
If I had to make one bet on here, and I likely
God.
won't make a single bet on the Green Bay Packers, but if you said you have to place one bet on that board, it would just be plus money under 10.5. Like,
yeah,
anything,
oh yeah, for sure.
Just the defense. If the offense really struggles, defense
I don't mind playoffs. No, at 3-1.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's hunt around. If you can get like a 350, 4-1 on that, that is actually something that I just said I wasn't gonna bet anything, but that is intriguing because under 10.5 probably puts you at a 50% probability to win to not make the playoffs. So again, let's say we add 50 cents to that under 10.5 to get it to 9.5. You're getting give them 65. Let's say you're getting 2-1 on this team to win 9 or fewer games. A team winning 9 games to make the playoffs, probably 10% or less. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bearish on that, but at that point, I would rather have 3.5 to miss the playoffs.
Yeah, I think
than
so
an
too.
alt under. So I mean, miss the playoffs is an alt under. And Zelensky here says plus 350 on DraftKings. Like that might be your look. If you want an alt under, probably play that as well. Because essentially what you're betting is, under 9.5.
8, 7, 8, 5, 6, 7, 8 wins. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
It's not crazy.
I think we did land on something.
I'm not going to bet it though. Honestly. I'm just saying, blow pack blow. I'm not gonna get involved with this team this year.
No, it's I don't think there's any reason to tie money up for that long with uncertainty being such a big thing, and what we're going to see from this team. You got to really feel like you understand where a team's headed that year to make a bet. Like I did bet the Bears under. That's 6.5. I finally just pulled trigger on it.
Good work, man. I'm not excited about the Packers. I'm not excited to talk about them this year. I'm not excited to have to cover whatever nonsense Aaron Rodgers has going on. Like, I think I'm ready for Aaron Rodgers to move on.
Yeah. Out of the league or to a different team?
I guess maybe I'll be happy if they make the playoffs because presumably a spot will open up where we can figure out when to fade them. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm being too tough on this offense. Maybe Rodgers is a good enough quarterback that he transcends it like Tom Brady did with some pretty bad offensive rosters in New England. Who knows? But I just don't see the same player. I think Rodgers is a clear class below Tom Brady. Wow. Yeah, it's my opinion.
Yeah, if truly, I think we will find out very quickly if his motivation to play well the past 2 years was that contract. Then yeah, your Lions and Vikings tickets are super live because a quarterback who doesn't care might be a problem with a bunch of receivers who are barely there. And it might be the Lions' year. So plan of attack is no plan. I definitely think there's some under spots. If we underwhelm with this offense and this defensive secondary and pass rush play well, I think that 49 with the Vikings is probably too high. And if we see other numbers like that against competent offenses that I think the Packers can stymie, I think they are a bit of an under team. And then this past starts like you joked around player props. We don't get into that a lot, but like the over sacks in that Bears game, you joked like that's a fun one because man, that's going to be a heyday for those
You
guys.
want to know another fun one that we stole from Will Brinson? Aaron Jones receiving props to the good every week.
Yeah.
Like realistically, if Aaron Jones is the number one receiving target, receptions, and yards for this Packers team this season, it will surprise me 0%. 0.0. He is the best pass catcher on this team. And I don't think it's especially close. The fact that he is a running back, I think, opens up value for him receiving yards, receptions over. Am I being too crazy?
No.
Who's
That's
a
a
better
big
pass
part.
catcher on this team?
So, and when I was reading up on the Getsy, the guy who headed out for Chicago,
Yep.
he was from Green Bay and he talked about like why, he's this big RPO guy. You just didn't see it because it's Aaron Rodgers, and the Aaron Rodgers offense runs a lot different. And Rodgers has these, that's why he doesn't take a ton of sacks, is because he has this offense built around him with all these outlets. Quick things are happening. Like he gets out of a play in a hurry if he can, because he's smart, he's good. Like he's won 2 MVPs. I shouldn't have to say he's good, but you do see a lot of that little quick outlets, like 1, 2, 3, read the field. I'm not going to be able to get this deep guy open. We're going to get 6 yards instead. And I mean, that's why those RPOs are often a pass, because a lot of times he's, why run and get tackled when I'm easily going to hit my running back or a tight end here. So I don't hate it. It's a big part of their offense.
Don't know much about the coordinator, Adam Stenavich, and what he's bringing to the table, but I do think that Aaron Jones in the passing role is pretty obvious. That one's pretty obvious.
Aaron Stenavich, Wes Phillips,
Adam Stenavich, Wes Phillips,
something Getsy, and then the Lions offensive coordinator is.
Oh, dude, 4. We have a division with 4. Ben Johnson.
Ben Johnson,
the Canadian sprinter. The Canadian
guy
sprinter.
who took over. Yeah, we have 4 new offensive coordinators.
4 new offensive coordinators in one division.
And
holy shit.
As of right now, only the Bears will have theirs calling the plays. There's a chance that Johnson calls plays, but they said they haven't decided that in Detroit yet. They will make that decision this summer. But there's still a chance that old kneecaps will be calling plays. So 4 new offensive coordinators, and at the end of the year, you might still not know the names of most of them. Because when you have like Zimmer, name some of his defensive coordinators. You don't hear about them when Zimmer is the mastermind behind the defense. The same thing goes with like Kevin O'Connell was kind of a name a lot of people hadn't heard of, because you don't talk about the Kevin O'Connell offense, you talk about the Sean McVay offense. And
True.
It'll be interesting to see what we get from some of this. So
I remember Kevin
Stenavich.
I remember Kevin O'Connell from his college days. You remember where he played?
San Jose State?
San Diego State. So close. He was
Oh God, I knew it. It was a Southern
close.
I went too far north.
So close.
Can't go any further south.
All right. Well,
let's call it Packers.
Enjoy. Yeah, let's go.
9-8.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds fair to me. And the 8 losses is because the offense can't get to 20 points.
Yeah. Defense held them to 17 again, and the Packers fall 17-3.
That's extreme. But yeah, Packers hosting the Patriots. Mac Jones only attempted 11 passes, but somehow the Patriots won 15 to 10 and covered. Yeah. All right, man. Well, let's call it a pod. I'm excited for next week.
2 pods in the books. 4, actually. Let's go.
I don't want to say that we're already in regular season form, but it did feel like we got up to speed real quick. So
yeah, this is not the first year we've done these guys. So, rate, review, subscribe, do all the things to help other people find these. If you leave me an Apple review, I will come to your house and pet your dog, kiss your babies, whatever you want. I'll
I like
come play a
dog
round
petting.
of golf with you. I love dog petting. Yeah, leave a Apple review, leave a review on wherever, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can turn the notifications off. I like to see those numbers go up, and I like to see the thumbs up on the YouTube stuff. So appreciate you guys. Appreciate the chat was on fire again today. And we'll be back next week with I'm not even gonna tell you. I'm gonna let you guess. I'm not telling you who we're doing. It's because I don't know.
Good one.
It's because